Wyoming Territory, June 1879. The sky burned orange behind the Wind River Range when the wagon tracks turned red with blood. Odessa Sutton had not screamed when the first shot rang out. She had shielded her children Tally and Theo with her own body, clutching them to the buckboard floor as the outlaws came down from the ridge like wolves. Her husband, Dean, had drawn his rifle. He died before he could raise it. It was quick, brutal, and loud. Then, just as fast, it was over. The gang rode off with the horses and supplies, leaving the wagon shattered, one wheel crooked in the dirt. Dean's body lay sprawled beside it, and Odessa, barely breathing, her dress soaked in blood that was not all her own, watched them fade into the dust with wide, unblinking eyes. Her children were gone, taken. She crawled to her knees, called out their names, but the desert swallowed her voice. Her hands trembled, fingers curled useless in the dry grass. The last thing she remembered before the world dimmed was a shadow on horseback, riding fast toward her from the west. Kade Prescott had not expected to find a massacre when he left the broken pine trail that evening. He had been tracking cattle rustlers for 2 days, his horse tired, his own body caked in dust and sun. But the smoke rising over the basin pulled him off course. He found the woman slumped beside the wagon, barely conscious, her face smeared with blood and dirt. Her husband was dead. The kids, 2 small ones, judging by the marks in the dirt, were gone. He did not ask questions. He lifted her into his arms, her body near weightless, and carried her to the shade of a cottonwood. She tried to sit up. "My children," she whispered. "They took them." "I know," Kade said gently, pressing her back down. "You just rest. I'll find them." Her eyes fluttered closed, lashes trembling. She looked too pale, too still. Kade set his rifle beside her and built a fire. He kept her warm through the night, checking her pulse, whispering quiet reassurances she likely never heard. "There's still a life waiting for us," he said once, his voice barely above the wind. "You just hold on." When morning came, she woke slow with a sharp intake of breath. Her eyes darted around, searching. "Where? You're safe," Kade said. "I'm Kade Prescott." "Found you last night." Odessa sat up stiffly. "Tally and Theo, they took them, I know. I saw the tracks, 5 riders, headed southeast. I can follow them." Odessa looked at him then, really looked. He was youngish, maybe late 20s, with sun-browned skin and dark stubble along his jaw. His shirt was worn, his boots dusty, but his eyes were steady. "Kind. You could just ride on," she said. "Why help me?" Kade looked down, adjusting his saddle cinch. "I had a sister," he said. "Bandits took her when I was 16. I never found her. Maybe I can do better this time." Odessa's throat tightened. She nodded. "I'm coming with you. You're not strong enough yet. I will be. They are my babies." He studied her for a long moment. Then he gave a short nod. "All right, but we ride careful. And we do not stop until we get them back." They buried Dean that afternoon beneath a lone pine. Odessa stood silent beside the grave, her hands clenched. Kade gave her space. Only when she turned away, tears staining her cheeks, did he offer his hand. She took it. They followed the tracks for 3 days. Odessa rode behind Kade on his horse, her arms wrapped tight around her middle, her dress torn at the hem. She said little, but her eyes never stopped scanning the horizon. Kade shared what food he had: jerky and hard biscuits, and gave her his canteen. At night, he built the fire and kept watch while she slept curled in his bedroll. On the 4th morning, they found the first sign: a boy's small shoe caught in a patch of sagebrush. Odessa dropped to her knees, lifting it with trembling hands. "It's Theo's," she breathed. "He was wearing these when we left Cheyenne." Kade knelt beside her. "They're not far ahead." She looked at him, her eyes shining with hope and fear. "You really think we can get them back?" Kade's voice was quiet but sure. "I will get them back. You have my word." That night, while the fire crackled low, Odessa sat beside him on a flat rock. The moon cast silver light across the land. She was silent a long time before speaking. "Dean and I married when I was 17. He was a good man, a decent father, but we were never close." "Not like I hoped." Kade glanced at her. "Why tell me that?" "Because I feel something when I look at you," she said, voice unsteady. "And I do not want to feel it, not now, but it is there." Kade said nothing for a long time, then softly, "I feel it too." She looked away, wiping her eyes. "I just need them back. That is all I care about." "Then that is what we will do first." He did not touch her. He just sat beside her, silent, warm, steady. And that night, as she lay down again, he stayed awake beside her, whispering softly, "There is still a life waiting for us. Just hold on, Odessa. I am not letting go." By the 5th day, the tracks led into the cliffs near Medicine Bow. The outlaws had holed up in an abandoned mining camp, half hidden in the rocks. Kade scouted the place at dawn, then returned to Odessa. "There are 5 men, maybe 6. I saw the kids. They are alive." Odessa's breath hitched. "Can we get to them?" "Only one way in. We go tonight." She gripped his arm. "Promise me you will not let them take my children again." "I promise." That night they crept down the ravine under a moonless sky. Kade moved like a shadow, silent and sure. Odessa followed close, her heart pounding. When a guard stepped away from the fire to relieve himself, Kade struck him with the butt of his rifle. They slipped into the main shack. Inside, Theo and Tally lay curled on a cot, tied but unharmed. Odessa rushed to them, tears pouring down her face. She cut the ropes, gathered them close. "Mama," Tally sobbed, "I knew you would come." Odessa kissed their hair, holding them so tight they whimpered. "We are going home," she whispered. "We are going home." The fight outside was short and brutal. Kade shot 2 men before they even reached their guns. The others fled into the night. When it was over, he came back into the shack, breathing hard, blood on his sleeve. Odessa stood there holding her children, her face streaked with tears. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." She crossed the room and threw her arms around him. He held her for a long time, his hand resting on the back of her head. When she pulled back, she looked up into his eyes. "I want that life," she said. "The one you whispered about, I want it with you." Kade brushed a hand across her cheek. "You already have it, right here." And this time when he kissed her, it was not soft or uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that meant forever. She kissed him back like she believed in it. Because she did. The air in the cabin was still, heavy with the scent of ash and pine sap. Theo slept curled at Odessa's side, his small chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a child finally safe. Tally lay close too, her fingers wrapped around a button from Odessa's sleeve, as if letting go might undo it all. Outside, dawn pressed faint color into the east, a soft gray blooming to blue across the tops of the pines. Kade stood at the door, rifle in hand, eyes sweeping the tree line. His right arm hung stiff at his side where a bullet had grazed him, nothing deep, but it bled steady through the night and soaked the cuff of his shirt. Odessa rose quietly, careful not to wake the children. She crossed the floorboards barefoot, her steps slow, deliberate. The cabin had been stripped of anything useful long before the outlaws claimed it. Empty crates, broken chair legs, one rusted kettle on a hook. But it held through the night, and that was enough. "You need that looked at," she said, nodding toward his arm. Kade turned but didn't argue. He stepped aside to let her pass, then followed her to the edge of the porch, where she crouched beside a wash basin and unwrapped the strip of bloodied fabric she'd found the night before. "Bullet didn't stay in," he said. "Just tore through the skin. Still needs cleaning." She dipped a rag in water, wrung it out, then pressed it firm against the wound. He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. "You ever stitched a man before?" he asked. "I've stitched worse," she said. My father was a cooper. Took a chisel to the leg once. Mama had fainted, so I took the needle. Kade's mouth pulled into something like a smile, but it faded quick. You stayed calm. Last night, you moved like someone who's seen things. I have. She reached for her needle and thread, boiled since sunrise in the kettle. He sat on the porch rail, arm outstretched, and she began the work, quiet and focused. He watched her a while, then asked, "What are you going to do now?" She didn't answer right away. The thread pulled through his skin with a clean, steady rhythm. "I don't have a plan," she admitted. "Cheyenne's behind us. Dean's buried 3 days back. What I do have is 2 children and a wagon wheel cracked clear through," he nodded. "You could come with me." She paused, looked up. "I bought a parcel near the Laramie foothills, 20 acres. Rocky soil, but there's a stream and a stand of cottonwoods. Figured I'd raise cattle, maybe horses if I could manage. And you'd want company for that. I'd want you, and the kids, if you'd have me." She finished the stitch, tied it off, and sat back on her heels. Her hands were steady, her eyes sharp. "You sure I'm not a burden?" "I've never been more sure of anything." They sat together a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. The morning had taken on a hush, like the world was waiting on their decision. Inside the cabin, Tally stirred. Odessa turned toward the sound, then looked back at Kade. "You said there was still a life waiting for us. What if we tried to live it?" Kade reached for her hand, rough fingers enclosing hers with quiet certainty. "We start today." She didn't cry. There was no tremble to her voice. Only a quiet kind of peace that settled between them like the first breath after a hard storm. By noon, they had packed what little they could carry. Kade rigged a travois for the children, and Odessa guided them down the slope, her hand never far from theirs. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. The path ahead was long and the journey would test them, but the worst was behind. A day's ride brought them to a trading post where a draft mule could be bartered for and a wheel replaced. Odessa sold her wedding ring to cover what Kade couldn't, and she didn't hesitate. That night, they camped under a stand of ash trees, the stars sharp above them. Kade showed Theo how to roll the kindling just right, and Odessa braided Tally's hair with a length of ribbon she'd found tucked in the bottom of her satchel. When the fire burned low and the children drifted off, Odessa leaned against Kade's shoulder, her body loose with something unfamiliar rest. "I didn't think I'd feel safe again," she whispered. "Neither did I." He wrapped his arm around her, gently this time, mindful of the stitches. She tucked her head beneath his chin. "I want to build something," she said. "Not just survive. We will." And before sleep took her, before the fire sank to embers, he whispered again into her hair, "There's still a life waiting for us." This time she believed him fully. 2 weeks later the land softened. The wagon moved slower now, not from breakage or weight, but because the mountains had given way to wide meadows and open sky. The green here was deeper, the kind that held water beneath it. Cottonwoods lined the banks of a narrow creek that sloped down from the north, and Kade reined in the mule when they reached a rise overlooking the land he'd spoken of. "There," he said. Odessa stepped down and lifted Theo from the wagon bed. Tally followed, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The breeze pulled at the hem of Odessa's skirt, and she stood still a moment, letting her gaze pass over the low hills and scattered trees, the creek threading through like a ribbon. The grass waved high and thick, good for cattle. A few distant antelope watched from a slope, ears twitching. "It's quiet," she said. Kade nodded. "No neighbors for 6 miles, closest towns west, 2 hours by horse." She ran her hand along the mule's neck, then looked at the children. "There's space here." He stepped beside her. "Thought it might feel like something we could shape." Tally took Odessa's hand. "Can we stay?" Odessa looked down, brushing a leaf from her daughter's hair. "Yes," she said. We can stay." They pitched a canvas shelter near the creek that evening, just enough to sleep under with the wagon pulled alongside for windbreak. Kade dug a fire pit while Odessa showed the children how to gather kindling without snapping the branches loud. They moved like they already belonged, as if the land had been waiting for them too. Later, after the children were asleep, she sat beside Kade near the fire, her legs drawn up, her elbows resting on her knees. "I thought I'd feel like I was stealing something," she said. "Taking joy after everything, but I don't. I just feel tired and steady." Kade stirred the coals with a stick. "Tired, I know. Steady's a start." She watched the flame catch a curl of pine bark, then let her voice fall low. "I haven't spoken of my mother in years. She died when I was 16. Fever. My father remarried inside 6 months and I left home not long after. I don't think I ever stopped moving after that." His hand shifted near hers in the dirt, not touching, but close enough to feel. "I used to think I didn't have it in me to stay anywhere," he said. "Then I bought this land and didn't leave it for almost a year. Just kept clearing brush, fixing fence that didn't need fixing. It kept me upright." She looked over at him. "You built it alone," he nodded. "Didn't have a reason not to." Odessa leaned her head against her arm. "You do now." He didn't answer, but his hand found hers in the dirt. He didn't lace their fingers, just held it there, palm to palm, warm and solid. That night, he sat beside her again after the fire burned low, same as he had before, but with the weight of something new between them, not grief this time, but the edge of a beginning. "There's still a life waiting for us," he whispered again, voice barely above the crickets. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply turned her hand over in his and held on. By the 4th day, they had dug the first post holes for the lean-to. Kade taught Theo how to tamp dirt around the base of the upright logs. Odessa kept tally nearby, weaving thin willow branches for the walls. She didn't know how to build a house, but she knew how to work in rhythm. She knew how to make things hold. At dusk, Kade stood on the ladder, nailing the crossbeam into place. Odessa handed him each length of timber without needing to be asked. "You trust me with this?" she asked. He looked down, sweat darkening his shirt collar. "More than I trust the ladder." She laughed, low and surprised. He grinned just once, then turned back to the work. That night they sat by the fire again, the children asleep in the wagon bed. Odessa leaned against his side, her head tucked beneath his collarbone. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she said. "You're not." "I still feel it, sometimes just for a breath. Like I'll wake up and be back on that road again." "You won't." She looked up at him, the firelight soft on her cheek. "I want to grow things. I want chickens. A cow, maybe. I want to sew Tally's first real dress with fabric we bought, not scraps. You'll have all of it." She touched his cheek, her palm rough from rope burn and sun. "I want it with you." He kissed her gently, like a promise drawn slow and sure. The wind picked up a little, rustling the cottonwoods, and somewhere downstream a frog bellowed once, then fell quiet. Odessa leaned against him again, her breath evening. "We'll build it," he said into her hair. "All of it, you'll see." And she believed him. Not because he said it, but because he'd shown her every day since the first. The rain came in late August, steady and cold, peeling the dust from the leaves and drawing steam from the sun-warmed earth. Odessa stood at the edge of the lean-to, a basket of wet laundry limp in her arms, watching the creek rise in slow, swirling inches. The children stayed inside, crouched near the hearth where Kade had stacked dry pine earlier that morning. He ducked beneath the low eave, shaking water from his hat, and took the basket from her without asking. "You'll catch chills standing there," he said. "I've stood through worse." He set the basket near the fire and pulled his coat from the peg, wrapping it around her shoulders before she could protest. She didn't remove it. The wool was still warm from his body. The cabin, no longer just a lean-to, had taken shape over the past month. The walls stood waist-high now, the roof beams laid out in waiting. Each day they added something, a notch cut here, a board planed there. What began as survival had started to look like intention. "You ever done anything like this before?" she asked, settling beside him near the fire. "Built a chicken pen once that leaned hard east," he said. "The birds never minded." She smiled faintly, stretching her fingers toward the flames. "I've never lived anywhere long enough to fix a roof before." Kade watched the firelight play across her face, quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I was born near Rock Springs. My mother died young. My father drank through most of what came after. When I left, I figured I'd ride until the land stopped, but it never did." She didn't speak, only listened. "I took to cowboying because it paid and kept me moving. No one expected you to stay. I figured that was safer." Odessa looked at him then. "And now I want to stay." The rain deepened, a soft roar on the canvas above. Theo shifted in his sleep, murmuring, then settled again. Tally's hand rested on his back, steady and small. Odessa reached for a piece of kindling and tossed it onto the fire. "Tally asked me yesterday if you were going to marry me." Kade blinked, then rubbed a hand along his jaw. "That's so." "I told her it wasn't a child's place to ask." He waited, "but I didn't say no." His voice stayed low. "Would you?" She turned to face him, knees drawn up, her eyes dark in the firelight. "I would." He exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to unspool something inside him. "Then I will, when the roof's on, when the door swings proper. I want to do it right." She nodded, lips pressed together, emotion flickering behind her eyes. "I don't need a church or a preacher with polished boots. Just a place that won't wash away in the night. You'll have it." The next morning the rain cleared and the creek left behind a ribbon of flattened grass and driftwood. Odessa and Kade walked the line of the fence together, checking for breaks. She carried a hammer, he carried a coil of wire. They worked in tandem, no need for directions. As they crossed the field, Odessa said, "I've never had a season that kept its promises." Kade stopped, wiped sweat from his brow. "Then let this be the first." She tightened the wire and stepped back. "I don't know how to be loved without waiting for it to end. Then we'll learn it together." The wind picked up, clean and sharp from the west. Odessa looked out across the land, to the cottonwoods near the creek and the half-built home in the distance. "I want the children to remember this place as something that held. They will." That evening, Kade handed her a folded cloth bundle once the children were asleep. Inside was a length of pale calico with a small sprig pattern, not extravagant, but whole and clean. "Bought it off a trader last week. Figured you might want it for something." Her fingers moved across the fabric. "I'll make a dress," he nodded. "And I'll marry you in it." She reached for his hand and brought it to her cheek, holding it there. "You told me once there was still a life waiting for us," she said. Kade didn't speak. She leaned in, pressing her lips to his slow and sure. When she pulled back, he was smiling, not wide but full. "There is," he said, "and we're living it." The last beam was set just after sunrise. Kade drove the final peg into place with the back of his axe while Odessa watched from the corner of the field, a length of muslin hanging from her arms, half-hemmed. The children chased each other near the creek, their laughter carrying over the grass. The roof sloped clean, angled to shed snow come winter. The door opened straight, and the hearthstone, hauled from the edge of the riverbed, had been laid with care. Odessa walked the perimeter of the cabin slowly, fingertips brushing the fresh-hewn wood. The scent of pine sap still clung to the logs. She stopped beneath the eave and leaned against the wall. "I never thought I'd live in a home I helped build." Kade stepped down from the ladder and set it aside. "You didn't just help. Your hands are in every corner of it." She studied him. His shirt stuck to his back from the work, his forearms streaked with sawdust. His hair had grown longer, curling slightly at his collar. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the dress." He wiped his hands on a rag, then tipped his head. "You want something different. I want to wear it soon." "How soon?" "Tomorrow." Kade reached for her hand, rough palm closing over hers. "You sure? The house is ready. The children are settled." "I don't want to wait for something that's already ours." That evening, Tally and Theo helped gather wildflowers from the edge of the creek. Odessa brushed Tally's hair until it shone, then let her tie a ribbon around her braid. Theo found a flat rock and asked if it could be a table. They set it beside the cabin, and Odessa laid a piece of clean linen over it, placing a tin cup of flowers in the center. Kade carved 2 rings from a scrap of fence post, smoothing the edges with a piece of sandstone. He didn't say much while he worked, but Odessa could see the way he kept glancing toward the sky as though watching for signs. At dawn, Odessa rose before the children. She stood in the half-light, fastening the last buttons of the calico dress. The fabric hung clean from her shoulders, plain but well-fitted, and the color brought out the warm tone of her skin. She didn't wear shoes. The earth was cool and damp beneath her feet. Kade stood waiting near the cottonwoods, a fresh shirt pulled over his shoulders, sleeves rolled once at the cuffs. His boots were polished with a rag and his hair combed straight back. Theo and Tally stood on either side of him, each holding a small stone they'd painted with bits of berry juice and ash. Odessa stepped toward them, the hem of her dress catching on the grass. Kade met her halfway. "You look like you belong here," he said. "I finally do." Reverend Clay from the edge of the valley had agreed to come, riding out before sunup. He offered the words with quiet dignity, hands folded around a small leather book. No pews, no organ, just the wind through cottonwood leaves and the smell of river air. When he asked if they would bind their lives together in the name of love and shared toil, they didn't hesitate. Kade slid the carved ring onto her finger, and Odessa did the same. The rings didn't shine, but they fit. The children clapped, then rushed forward, wrapping their arms around Kade's waist and Odessa's skirts. Afterward, they ate cornbread with honey and dried apple slices from a tin. Kade poured a cup of coffee for each of them, and Odessa let Tally sip from hers. That night, with the children asleep on their pallets near the hearth, Odessa stood at the doorway watching the stars rise. Kade came behind her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I've never had anything in my life that felt this solid," she said. "You do now." She turned to face him. "I never thought I could fall in love after losing what I did. I didn't think I could let anyone close again. But we did." He leaned down, pressing his lips to her brow. "We built it from nothing." She took his hand and led him inside, past the fire, past the worn boots by the door, to the bed frame they'd built together from pine and rope. They lay side by side, his body curved against hers, the breath between them slow and even. No fear. No doubt. Just the warm hush of belonging. Years passed, but the peace didn't fade. The cabin stood through each season. Winters brought snow stacked high against the walls, and Kade taught Theo how to split wood without cracking the grain. Spring brought a calf born under a storm sky, and Tally ran to fetch Odessa, her voice wild with joy. They planted potatoes and beans, lined the garden with rock, and sang while they worked. Odessa stitched clothes from old flour sacks, and Kade built a rocking chair that sat beside the hearth. One summer evening, Odessa stood in the doorway with her hands on her back, belly round with their third child. She watched Kade ride in from the ridge, a sack of flour slung across his saddle. He dismounted slow, smiling when he saw her. "You're home," she said. "Always." And he came to her, kissed her cheek, then rested his hand over the curve of her stomach. Their life was not loud, but it was full. The cabin stayed warm. The fields held. The children grew tall and strong beneath the Wyoming sky. And through every silence, every morning light, every hand held across a table, love remained the truest thing they ever built.